My mother told me this story not long ago, and I couldn't shake it from my mind. It's about a woman named Latifa, infamous across the city for her dark craft, black magic. Latifa was no ordinary woman. Her name was spoken in hushed tones, with fear and disdain. She had spent her entire life weaving curses and casting spells, leaving a trail of destruction in her wake. She tore families apart, cursed people into lifelong illnesses, stripped others of their wealth, and inflicted suffering wherever she went. It was said she reveled in misery, thriving on the power her sorcery gave her. But no one escapes the grip of death, not even Latifa. After years of committing unspeakable acts, she passed away. Her death sent a ripple of unease through the community, but it wasn't until her daughters prepared her body for burial that the true horror began. The daughters, following tradition, brought their mother's body for the ritual washing before burial. Latifa had always been fair-skinned in life, but what they saw after the cleansing left them paralyzed with fear. Her complexion had darkened dramatically. Her once pale skin was now a deep, almost pitch-black shade. The sight was so grotesque, so unnatural, that the daughters broke down, wailing and clutching their mother's lifeless body in despair. Tears streamed down their faces as they begged God for mercy. They knew the truth they had always known. In Islam, it's believed that a righteous life leaves a person's face radiant and serene in death. But those who live in sin bear its mark even in the grave. Latifa's transformation was undeniable proof of her dark deeds, and her daughters, desperate to save their mother's soul, pleaded for her sins to be forgiven. The ritual continued, and it came time to wrap her body in the burial shroud. As the men carried Latifa's corpse to her final resting place, they experienced something deeply unsettling. Her body, they said, grew heavier with every step. What started as a manageable weight soon became almost impossible to bear, as though an unseen force was holding her back. They staggered forward, beads of sweat forming on their brows, each step more grueling than the last. The witnesses knew this was no ordinary struggle. They whispered among themselves, certain that Latifa's resistance to her burial was a manifestation of her tormented soul. The men carrying her could feel it, the weight of her sins pressing down on them, her spirit refusing to go to the grave, unwilling to face what awaited her on the other side. The men pressed forward, dragging Latifa's body toward the grave. The weight seemed to defy reason, growing heavier with each passing moment. When they finally reached the gravesite, two cemetery workers began digging, their shovels biting into the dry earth. Yet no matter how deep they dug, something wasn't right. Each time they tried to lower the body into the grave, an invisible force seemed to push back. It was as though the earth itself rejected her. They dug deeper, then tried again, and still the body wouldn't settle. Frustrated and unsettled, the workers continued to dig, sweat pouring down their faces as the oppressive weight of the situation bore down on everyone present. The imam, sensing the growing unease, began reciting prayers. His voice rose above the murmurs of the crowd, steady and determined. Verse after verse, his words filled the air, pushing back the creeping dread. Finally, after what felt like hours, the body was forced into the grave. The moment was tense, the atmosphere thick with an unspoken fear. As the burial was completed, the men prepared to leave the cemetery, their footsteps heavy with unease. Just as they neared the gate, a deafening explosion shattered the stillness. Boom! The sound was so powerful it seemed to shake the very ground beneath them. Spinning around, their eyes widened in horror as flames erupted from Latifa's grave. Smoke billowed into the night, the acrid stench of burning filling the air. The men froze in terror, their minds struggling to comprehend what they were witnessing. The flames licked the night sky, and the men began to shout, their voices rising in frantic prayers for protection. Panic gripped the group, but the imam held his ground. His voice rang out above the chaos as he began reciting verses from the Quran with renewed urgency. The others joined in, their trembling voices weaving together in a desperate plea for divine intervention. Meanwhile, some of the men ran to fetch water to extinguish the fire. Buckets were hurriedly passed, their contents splashing against the inferno. Hours passed in this chaotic struggle until, finally, the flames were subdued. As the smoke cleared, the scorched remains of Latifa's body lay exposed. Her flesh was charred, her features unrecognizable. The sight left everyone shaken, but the imam stood firm. He made a grim decision. "We cannot leave her here," he said. "This is not over." With great care, the workers lifted what was left of Latifa's body from the grave and transported it back to the morgue. The imam instructed the morgue staff to hold the body for a few days. "We will try again," he said. "Insha'Allah, we will conduct the burial properly next time." But as the men departed that night, a single thought haunted them all. Was this woman so steeped in evil that even the earth itself refused to accept her? A few days later, the imam returned to the cemetery, this time with the same men who had witnessed the horrors of the first burial. The tension was palpable. No one spoke of it openly, but the question lingered in their minds. Would the events of that terrifying day repeat themselves? Determined to ensure a proper burial, the imam began reciting verses from the Quran with unwavering focus. The men joined in, their voices low and trembling at first, but growing louder as they tried to suppress their fear. The prayers went on for what felt like an eternity, the air thick with apprehension. The group kept glancing at the grave, bracing themselves for the worst, but this time the burial was uneventful. The body, which had once resisted with an almost supernatural force, was now lowered into the grave without incident. The dirt was shoveled over it, sealing Latifa's remains beneath the earth. There were no explosions, no flames, no unnatural resistance, just silence. The men, still wary, waited for a few moments before leaving. When nothing happened, they finally exhaled, relief washing over them like a wave. The imam, sensing their unease, reassured them. "It is done now. She has been laid to rest." And with that, they left the cemetery, finally free of the weight of her sinister legacy. This story remains one of the most well-known tales in southern Tunisia, particularly in Gabes. It's passed down as a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the consequences of a life filled with darkness. While it may seem short, the chilling details and the events that unfolded leave a lasting impression on anyone who hears it. If you enjoyed this story and it sent chills down your spine, don't forget to smash that like button. It really helps the channel. And if you're into more scary and mysterious tales like this, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Sharing is caring. So if this story gave you goosebumps, share it with your friends and family. Let's spread the chills together. Your support is what keeps this channel growing, and every like, comment, and share makes a huge difference. Let me know in the comments what you thought of today's story, and if you have your own spooky experiences, I'd love to hear them.